So for you that may have read my posting tonight about the Whataburger jingle that my mother created back in the early 60s that I remember as a kid. Um, so this has really bothered me for a very long time that this was never publicly exposed by Whataburger. Um, I contacted Whataburger headquarters a few times. I don't know how many times, maybe 4 times over the last 30 years. They were, it was separated out every 8 or 10 years, every 6 or 8 years or whatever. I would contact them, hoping that they would discover something about the jingle that my mother created for them in the early 60s. I posted the story about it on Facebook tonight. First time I've ever made a public issue about it before. Um, I even went out on YouTube to see if I could find a copy of the jingle. I could not. I found a lot of other spin-off jingles from later years from other people, much later years, since the internet age, I guess, that other people have made their own versions of Whataburger jingles, songs, etc. As far as I know, my mother was the one that created the very original jingle for Whataburger. If there was ever any jingle previous to that, I've never heard anything about it. It would have had to have been in the 1950s. I'm 99.9% certain that my mother created the very original jingle that Whataburger used on radio. I heard it on radio shortly after she created it. Um, when I say shortly after, I'm talking about a year or so after she created it. Was the first time I recall as a kid hearing it, because obviously we were excited to hear it. And I was living in Harlingen, Texas at the time, and I heard it on the radio then. And that had to have been 1965 or 1966 that I recall hearing it on the radio when we were down in Harlingen. Now, she created it, the jingle, in Odem, Texas, prior to us going to Harlingen. She submitted it, she wrote it, submitted it, mailed it to Grace Dobson in the mail. Now, I wasn't with my mother every minute of the day, so I don't know exactly every little event that happened, but I do know for certain that she created the jingle because she would rehearse it in the living room, and I would be there, and I saw her write it down, and I pretty much had it memorized myself even before it was ever submitted or mailed off to Mrs. Dobson. So my mother and I were the first ones to ever hear that jingle. Of course, my mother was, because she was the one that created it. And some of you asked me, well, which version was it that she created? And I said, well, it's the original version, and to the best of my recollection, it went something like this. What a burger. What a burger, big and round. Always get a quarter-pound. Onions, lettuce, pickles too. What a burger. You'll love it too. That's the version that I remember that she submitted, to the best of my memory. Now, this has been approximately 55 years ago when this happened, but it's embedded in my mind. And again, I won't get into the whole story about my mother not getting paid for submitting the jingle, blah, blah, blah. It was never about money for us, and certainly not for me, but it would be nice if my mother was recognized somehow, that she was the composer, writer, author, whatever you want to call it, of the jingle, the original jingle for Whataburger in the early 1960s. I've never been able to get anyone from Whataburger executive staff to acknowledge that. I've submitted information to them on a number of occasions, like I mentioned, spread out over the years. They claim that they did research it. They claim that they did talk to Dobson family members. So I'm assuming everybody in the Dobson family is aware of me presenting this to them a number of times over the years. I've never heard from anybody from the Dobson family. I have heard from people from the executive level of Whataburger, from the headquarters, but they said that they can't substantiate the information I'm giving to them, and so therefore it's just floated out there. Now, the fact that I can't find any public internet version of the original Whataburger jingle makes me a little suspicious too. I'm not saying that there's not one out there on the internet, I just haven't found one, but there could be. It could be out there somewhere. I haven't been able to find it, but the fact that I haven't been able to find it makes me think, okay, well, they know my mother created this jingle, and maybe they think that I'm trying to get some kind of financial reward or something, which I'm not. So anyway, it is what it is, and my mother passed away approximately 6 months ago, and it's really been on my mind pretty heavily now. For many, many years, I would go into Whataburgers. I wouldn't even think anything about that event of my mother creating the jingle, because my mother was so passive and nonchalant about it that I just grew to not think about it much. And so 99% of the times when I go into Whataburger, I don't even remember that my mother created that jingle of the place the business that I'm walking into. But it's really started bothering me very recently, and I wish somehow or another they would be able to recognize her for creating that jingle. My understanding is that Whataburger has been acquired by another company, so I'm pretty sure that's true, and therefore I've just given up on all of my attempts of trying to get Whataburger to acknowledge this event of the jingle that I'm referring to. So anyway, I'm just throwing this out there, and that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And anybody that knows me over the years knows that I'm not one to fabricate or make up stories or fibs or whatever you want to call it. And anybody that knew my mother knows that she was very easygoing, very passive, and she certainly wasn't the type to toot her own horn, if you will, at all. So I think more than anything, my mother was a little bit embarrassed that after the fact that she realized it was a mistake, not keeping a copy of, or keeping the original version handwritten or even typed, and then submitting a copy to Mrs. Dobson, Miss Grace Dobson. So she mailed in the original, and that was the only copy that she made. Now, I know she wrote, when she was composing it, that she wrote down, different words or versions of it, but she only came up with one final draft, and that was the one that was submitted by mail to Mrs. Grace Dobson. And there was never any other papers of the final version laying around as far as I know. And I think that she probably, from what I remember as a little kid, she didn't really take it all that serious that it was going to be, she didn't even know if it was ever even going to be broadcasted or even be used at all. And very surprisingly, it was. And over the years, it became a huge jingle statewide. It was played on TV and radio for a long time. I remember for a long time it was on radios, and I believe on television too. And And then I think later years, I think I heard the version changed up a little bit. I don't recall what tweaks, changes were made, but I think there was a slightly different version that came out years later. But anyway, I just want everybody to know that my mother was the one that created that jingle. And again, it is what it is. But you've heard it from the only surviving direct family member of the family of where that was originated from. And for many decades, this has never been mentioned publicly. So anyway, there it is. Take care, everyone. Thank you.